Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Your Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Krypton. So, a very great episode with a lot of interesting things that we're going to see unfold. I figured there'd be a scapegoat with the whole, situation. I wasn't expecting it to necessarily be liked. I knew she'd suffer ramifications for not following orders, but I didn't know that they would literally, because I thought, either Darren or Nissa were going to be like, okay, no, like that, Sagittari from the last episode that, Lyta had arrested. I thought she was going to take the fall. That's so it's like, okay, clear cut, just she's the fall person. But it's like, no, basically people, the rank lists are very restless about the whole situation. So they needed someone higher up in the food chain to take the fall for it, which is Lyta, which sucks considering the fact is that she did everything she could to kind of keep the order. Like, she's the one that immediately acted when that Sagittari went out of her way to do that, killing that innocent person, even going as far as like, oh, it was self-defense and stuff like that. Even like the council that like Lyta had to respond to, like she's like, I did my best to keep order. I did make sure all my people stayed safe. Like obviously, I mean, I think there's truth to what Lyta was saying. Obviously, she was trying to give Seg more time too, but it was also just because there was truth in it because like she was trying to make sure everything stayed good on both sides, that no one went crazy like that Sagittari did. But the thing is, she has the audacity to lie. Like obviously, Darren kind of switches that. Because what got me was I didn't actually expect it to be the voice of Rao to be the one that's like, okay, we need to put it on someone else because the voice of Rao wants to keep his power, and it's like, oh, new cycle day, and it's like, oh, the people won't really listen to his words, which is kind of like, it makes you really wonder, does the voice of Rao actually believe what he says, or is it just all about power for him? I mean, the way he acts and the way other people act as well, it seems like it's all power when it comes to him. So that was, like I said, that whole situation, like labeling her a traitor, even going as far as say she's Black Zero, I was like, did not see that coming. Another element I didn't see coming was the fact is that Nissa was going to help because Seg comes to her and it's like, yeah, I love Lyta, and it's like, Lyta, I keep doing that, sorry. And she's willing to help. I was like, okay, so I get it. You're trying to stay on Seg's good side, which is like, okay, I can understand why you're doing this, but it's like, why are you willing to help? And just enough, we also find out, like, I guess, I don't know, like, because I guess I underestimate Nissa too, because I just thought she was just some like pampered, like, power hungry person, but it's like, no, apparently she does some stuff like here. She's even like she even talks about the fact is that she's going to be an advocate for Lyta because she's actually Nissa is a lawmaker, which is kind of interesting. But to be fair, it's like, well, you're from one of the main houses on in Krypton, so it's kind of like, well, it kind of makes sense, but like I said, it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting because I just assumed that most people in those positions don't really have any, like certain people, sure, but I didn't, like I said, I just thought she was just some pampered princess who was power hungry. It's like, no, there's more to her than that, to a certain degree. But like I said, I kept wondering, it's like, why are you trying to, it's like, I was like, it's all for Seg, but what's the whole point? And then we finally learn all of this is connected. Basically, her and her dad want to overthrow the voice of Rao. It's kind of like a revolution in their sense. It's like, okay, like things have kind of been run long period of time like this. Granted, we still don't know how long this whole voice of Rao thing has kind of been a part of Krypton's history. I guess quite a bit of time until, I guess, up to that point when Rao was kind of worshipped as the only god. Because remember, there was that old thing about they used to actually worship other gods until Rao was kind of like the one true god that they worship. So I guess around that time, maybe a voice of Rao pops up every once in a while, and it gets kind of passed down or something, disciple to from master to disciple, and so on and so forth. So, because it seems like that's something that's not just recent. It seems like that's kind of part of like Krypton's history of how that works, and they're trying to fight what has kind of been their history for such a long period of time of having the voice of Rao being, the voice of Rao and kind of being the one that kind of dictates how a lot of stuff goes down in Kandor City in particular. And it's like, the reason why she's helping is because she needs Seg. I guess because if you can get Seg can unite everyone just because of who he is. I guess because the L family played such a role. I guess at the time, Darren didn't recognize what he was doing, I wonder, does Nissa even really know too? Like, because, like, Darren's got to know more than what he knows. Like, that must have had been, like, something passed down from, like, the voice of Rao to be like, oh, that Darren had to do that. And Darren did, because Darren probably didn't want to betray the voice of Rao like he is now. Like, oh, like he had no choice but to try and remove Lyta from the equation, because it's like he needed a sacrificial lamb, and it's like I couldn't go against his orders, because basically they had their plans. And I guess like even back then the whole vow situation would have meant going against the plans they kind of had set in motion, potentially not less the whole plans they have now or something they come up fairly recently. So I don't know, either way. But it's about getting Seg and Lyta, in particular Lyta's mom, because her mom's very influential. You know, she's the Primus Zod, and you know, she's top dog. And it's like, if they can get her and Seg, then they can kind of unite all the other houses under, you know, House Vex. Darren will kind of lead and unite the houses and the rankless, which is like, I don't think it, because it's even something like they even go to Lyta's mom about it, and she's like, I'm not an idiot. You're going to exchange one power-hungry person for another, you know? And so it's like, okay, so it's not from the kindness of your heart, that this is just further manipulation, that this is just a means to an end for you, you know? So that's kind of interesting. Because at the very least, they could have, like, for Nyssa, it's like we could have at least mended defenses. Yes, Primus might not have Lyta's mom might not have trusted us as much, but it's like, hey, we could have easily slowly gotten closer and closer to him. But it's like, now that we've locked her daughter up and is basically sending her to her death, that's not going to happen. It's like we are literally screwing up our own plans. But basically Darren saying he did this so that they could continue their plans. It's a little wrinkle in the plan, but it's like this is the only way he can make sure that their plans still kind of stayed on schedule. But it's like without all of this, like it's all going to fall apart. So like I said, it's just kind of fascinating. And once again, I still kind of feel like Darren thinks he's in control, but I think it's Nyssa. She's the one that's really in control. Like, once again, like I said, as time is going on, like, not even just in this episode, but in the past episodes too, it's like, oh yeah, the wording she said in the pilot, basically being like, oh yeah, my dad thought he picked you, like I told him to kind of pick you, and it's like, I still feel like she's even manipulating her own dad. Like, I think when the time comes, she plans to kind of take the power from her dad too. It's kind of always been like my mindset about this, and I feel like this kind of cements that a little bit more in my head, but ultimately we'll have to wait and see about that. It is kind of interesting, the whole situation with Dev and Seg, plus Lyta, that little love triangle situation. Very interesting, considering the whole fact is that like, Dev obviously has more, it's not just loyalty, he says. It's like, obviously, he has feelings for Lyta. So I guess they're kind of, like, betrothed to each other, kind of like Nyssa and Seg are. I guess it's kind of something like that. Because it doesn't seem like it's as far as the whole Seg and Lyta, I mean, the whole Seg and Nyssa situation, potentially. Because we've already picked out our babies. I guess that's not, like, something you just immediately go to. It's just, they kind of submit having Seg on their side. They're trying to rush the whole thing and like, oh, we're together and we'll have a baby. Like, it's trying to cement that even more. Obviously you can tell it kind of bothers Lyta a little bit, but she tries not to let it bother her. But because Nyssa tries to throw in her face, it's like, oh, does Dev know about the whole you and Seg situation? Which is like, okay, stop trying to get underneath my skin. Which obviously we know, like, Dev does know, because the moment Seg came there, he was like, tell me. I know, I want to hear you say it, like the reason why he was there to see Lyta. And Seg was like, do not start this, you know, so it's there. He's never really talked about it, but it's probably always there in the back of his mind. Like within the confines of this show, this is the first time we've ever seen them together in the same scene, isn't it? They've never had a confrontation like this before, so it's kind of like a love rivalry situation, because he knows how Seg feels about Lyta. I don't know if he knows for sure that it's like the same way. Like, he's probably kind of like, well, fine, she can have her little torrent affair or whatever, but the fact of the matter is, me and Lyta, we are part of the houses, you are rankless. He seems like he could potentially be open-minded, but at the same time, it just seems like he's very close-minded. Seems like Lyta's the only person amongst the houses that really kind of sees Seg for Seg, and not just like, oh, he's some rankless dude. I mean, even Nyssa and her dad look at Seg as nothing more than a pawn in their game, you know, so... What's kind of interesting, too, is her mom is basically kind of like, I know you're protecting Seg, so give him up. It's like, this is more than Seg. It's like, no, it's not. I know you're just covering from him, which is like, she's not. She kind of is, but she kind of isn't. But it's like, she can't explain what she knows, because no one's going to believe her, you know? And she knows definitely her mom's not, because her mom's very stubborn. What are they going to do about the whole thing? Like, because, like I said, her mom got offered the deal by Nissa, but it's like, will she take it? I mean, especially because she is who she is. She is very loyal. Like, she knew from the beginning, like, things weren't on the up and up. She knew things were kind of off, but it's like, if my daughter's going to suffer, it's going to be for not following orders. But there's no way she's a traitor. No Zod has ever been a traitor. Even her armor was kind of tagged traitor. And it's like, but for her, it's kind of like she knows things are up, but she can't really act because no matter how she feels about things, she's a loyal soldier. She will follow the chain of command. She will follow her orders no matter how kind of sucky they are. Hence, like, why she put down Seg's parents is because she knew that they weren't Black Zero, that they weren't terrorists or whatever, but she did it anyway because it's like they raised their weapons. And ultimately, she knew what they were trying to do. They were trying to ensure that Seg would be spared any punishment. If they were taken and removed from the equation, no backlash would fall upon him in a sense. So she knew on that level. Obviously, she kind of talks about it, understand why she did what she did. So, which kind of goes back to the whole thing of like, she has her flaws, but she knows what it means to be a mother and care for your child. So she has her moments of empathy, so I am curious to see what she will do. In this episode, because he had the whole situation of Lyta being locked up, and obviously, so Seg's like, okay, we have to bring them wrong, and we can show them and let them see what's happening. That way we can prove that she had nothing to do, that she shouldn't be blamed for the Sagittari dying, or, that whole mess that went down. But ends up getting taken, and it's like, oh my god, it's Black Zero took him, and it's like, nope, apparently not. Their commander, interesting enough, I'm blanking on the actor's name and it bothers me so much. Interestingly enough, he played Oliver's stepdad in Arab. Side note, well, to be fair, it kind of makes sense. I think the last time we probably saw him was when Oliver's mom died. Potentially, that might have been the last time we saw him, so that had to be like season 2 was kind of the last time. I guess what the way the story is, it's like not like he really had a part to really play necessarily anymore. But nevertheless, it's just kind of interesting. That's a DC show. This is another DC show. But it seems like he's connected to Black Zero, but he's only using Black Zero, like, for their weaponry and stuff like that. Like, so he doesn't really believe in their calls because he knows there's a bigger threat out there, and that bigger threat is Brainiac. So it's like, we still don't know how he knows about Brainiac, because the only person that's aware of Brainiac was Val. Like, he's the only person on Krypton knowingly that we know of is aware. I don't know, like, how much the voice of Rao or how much Darren actually knows. Like, there was a whole, like, because it's like I said, because some of the way Darren acts made me go, he doesn't really know. But there's another part of me, it's like, oh, obviously he's doing it because he does know, and he doesn't want to, if Val starts scaring people with all his, truths, power will slip away from him. So, like I said, like, all his plans would kind of go up in flames or something like that. Maybe like a lot more people would back up Val, so maybe that's it. I don't know. It's kind of interesting considering the fact is, I think it's just he thought like Val was just some crazy lunatic spouting craziness, nevertheless, it's just that whole situation. So, but it's very fascinating that. And also how the commander operates, because the moment that dude zaps Seg, he's like, oh, thank you. Because it was like, oh, yeah, because he was talking about the commander like that. He's like, oh, thank you. And he was like, grabs him by the neck and it's like, no one touches Seg but me. And then snaps his neck. It's like, wow, you don't mess around, dude. It was kind of interesting because it seemed like Seg and him had a deal of like, okay, I'll take you to Rom's body if you break someone out of Fort Ross for me. I was assuming that was Lyta, because I was like, oh, so we're going to make it so that Lyta's actually on the run, potentially? Is that what that was kind of setting up? But it doesn't work out like that, because Seg ends up escaping. I guess that's kind of interesting, too, because it's also setting, like, kind of going back to it, that kind of sets up Black Zero to not be, like, they're this invisible threat that everyone's kind of a little worried and scared about, but ultimately this turns into a situation of them being like, no, you don't need to worry about that, because they're just kind of like background noise to, like, obviously this whole Brainiac situation, as well as like the political drama that's going down on Krypton. Like, obviously Brainiac is the bigger threat, but it's kind of even interesting hearing the commander being like, oh, if like Black Zero really knew the truth about Brainiac coming, like, so it's just kind of interesting to think about that, because it's like all you hear is Black Zero. I guess it's because it's just one of those situations of like, oh, you have this problem which seems so big, which it is, just because it just the scale of your world. But no, for someone like Seg and the commander and his group, it's like they know there's a bigger threat out there, and that's Brainiac. Also, really quickly, I love the whole conversation. It's like, oh, Mr. Strange, like Val calling him Mr. Strange. He's like, no, no, Mr. Strange was my father. He's like, I'd rather you just call me Doctor Strange. And he's like, no, 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 just call me Adam. I was like, shut up with your jokes. Interesting enough, since I'm kind of going out the fourth wall here and stuff like that, it's actually the 80th anniversary. I do appreciate that during the commercials they're talking about it's the 80th anniversary for Superman, so that's pretty cool. I thought it was kind of pretty neat. So serendipitous timing and stuff like that. I'm sure that was kind of planned out and everything. But nevertheless, it's kind of sad that there was no way to save Rom. And basically, her final words were saying like, "Oh, you have to stop Ona." And I was like, okay. So basically, breaking down the whole situation, Ona gets chosen by the voice of Rao to be its disciple. And I was like, it's like the moment she said that, I was like, right. Oh, because let's not forget that Sentry was in Rom, and it was dormant for a while. So I was like, maybe it's been inside of Ona the entire time, and it's been very dormant. The moment she gets close to the voice of Rao, because the commander has said himself, like, it's still going to try and search for people at a higher position to kind of take over. It's still always looking to spread its infection, the Sentry. And I was like, oh man, but nothing ever happened necessarily. I was like, oh, is it going to wait till they're alone? Turns out it was in the statue she had. I guess like from the stuff that Rom had found, she crafted that statue for Ona, and a Sentry was kind of laying in wait there. And then not unless it's a situation of like, I mean, was that kind of the point? Was like Rom being controlled by that thing, unbeknownst to her, being controlled by that thing, ended up like giving that to her, knowing that it could be used like that to eventually spread it, or could it be that it actually is an Ona and that she put another one, spread the infection into this? I mean, it's most likely the first one. Just the fact is, it was just hiding in there the entire time. But I just thought it came about a way I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting it to be in a toy or whatever. So. Not necessarily toward the statue, I mean. It is kind of sad that basically her world kind of got turned upside down like that, but like her faith in, I don't know, like, I guess it is kind of just serendipity, like maybe, I don't know, like, I mean, serendipity in Brainiac's case, I guess, but it's just kind of like, it's just interesting that things kind of worked out like that. I mean, I think that was all part of the voice of Ralph thing. It's like, oh, I want this young one. Yeah, because I want everyone to see like, oh yeah, I'm listening to this young girl, like, oh yeah, her mom's gone, but your mom will serve in the grace of Rao. I think that was kind of like placating a little bit to the crowd, and then instead of playing it up and like, oh yeah, like this feeds into it even more of like the crowd. It gave him the opportunity to kind of sway the crowd a little bit more. So it's kind of interesting with him being kind of possessed now. We'll never really get to know too much of, and we got little pieces of the real voice of Rao in the sense of like, oh, the fact is going as far as setting someone up for a crime they should be charged with the whole like treason thing for Lyta. So we got a little bit of that, but as if it does completely throw out my thought that, because, previously I was thinking like, oh, he was actually already infected, or he's from the future or something like that. Like, I guess with the more things kind of turn, it kind of makes me think Brainiac is a person from the future, but it's still, I guess he came from the future and then he just kind of just settled here. He's just been collecting worlds because he knows at this point in time, like, there's no heroes in existence, at least in maybe this part of space, because I don't know how far reaching a lot of the other superheroes would be, like the Guardian Corps, or like, other heroes that kind of fall under that category of like galactic, universal, or like alien heroes, essentially, I mean, it's also interesting to know, well, this is far enough back that Mars is actually still around too. I mean, I don't know if that's something that's ever going to play up in this or not. I'm also curious, well, because it's in Supergirl, I don't know if they'd ever kind of like tackle that in this either. It's like the whole Daxam situation. Like, Supergirl was my first experience with Daxam, and it's literally like Krypton's rival planet. So I don't know if that's going to be something that comes up or not. It seems like it might not be the case, considering the fact is that, I mean, maybe at this point in time, because Krypton is like in its earlier infant stages, much like Earth was at one point in time, where it's like, oh, where people once upon a time thought, that Earth was the center of the universe, so just like that, Krypton's kind of slowly is getting to that point where it realizes, oh, we're not alone out there in the stars, essentially. So this is kind of just me rambling, so I do apologize. But it's definitely going to be interesting going forward with this whole, like, because obviously everything the voice of Raul does from this point on is going to be in service to Brainiac. We do have at least some way of detecting someone who is infected with the Sentry. Is that little bug thing that he stuck in Seg, who he later, like, that woman kind of got stuck with it. One of the commander's followers. So, and at the very end, we have Seg going across the, probably trying to get back to Kandor City, wounded, bleeding. So that and it definitely is hitting the snow. So you can definitely know they can be tracking him. So it's definitely going to be very interesting to see what goes down in the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.